The sound of tearing fabric cut through the crowded bar like a gunshot. 1 second, the place had been alive with loud music, clinking glasses, and the rumble of motorcycles outside. The next, every voice disappeared. A waitress named Grace stood frozen beside the bar, clutching the torn front of her uniform with trembling hands. The biker who had grabbed her was twice her size, covered in black leather and tattoos, and for one terrifying moment, nobody moved. But then the biker looked at what had been revealed beneath the torn fabric, and the anger drained from his face. His hand fell to his side. The glass in the bartender's hand slipped onto the counter. Even the men who had been laughing seconds earlier stared in complete silence. What they saw was something no one in that bar could have imagined. If you believe that kindness can change a life, that people deserve second chances, and that sometimes the strongest heroes are the ones nobody notices, take a moment to like this story, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Kind Heart Stories. You never know when a simple act of kindness might become the reason someone keeps going. It was a cold Friday evening in a small town outside Nashville, Tennessee, where the neon sign of a roadside bar called the Rusty Spur glowed against the dark highway. The place was popular with truckers, construction workers, and motorcycle riders who came through town on weekends. Grace Morgan had worked there for almost 3 years. She was 32 years old, a single mother, and the kind of person who apologized when someone else stepped on her foot. She had learned long ago that life did not always reward gentle people, but she had refused to become hard because of it. Every morning, she packed a lunch for her 8-year-old son, Noah, worked long shifts, came home exhausted, helped him with homework, and quietly worried about how she would pay the next bill. Grace never told customers about her problems. She smiled even when her feet hurt. She carried plates even when her back ached. When someone left a small tip, she thanked them as sincerely as she thanked the people who left $20. Her manager, Rebecca, often wondered how Grace kept that smile after everything she had been through. Grace simply believed that everyone was carrying something invisible, and sometimes a kind word was the only thing you could give them. That Friday night, a large group of bikers arrived just after 9. They belonged to a motorcycle club traveling through Tennessee. Most of them were loud but harmless, joking among themselves and ordering food. But one man stood apart from the others. His name was Cole Bennett. He was 41, broad-shouldered, heavily tattooed, and carried the kind of silence that made people nervous. He had lost his younger brother years earlier in a highway accident, and after that, something inside him had changed. He rarely trusted strangers, and had become known among his friends for reacting before thinking. Grace was assigned their table. She approached them with her usual smile, placed the menus down, and asked what they wanted. Cole barely looked at her. He ordered coffee and a burger. Grace noticed his hands shaking slightly, though she pretended not to see. When she returned with his coffee, she accidentally bumped the edge of the table. A few drops spilled near his hand. Cole's expression immediately hardened. Grace apologized and reached for a towel. She expected anger, but something about her calmness seemed to stop him. He said nothing. She cleaned the table and walked away. Later, when she passed by again, she noticed Cole sitting alone. The others had gone outside. His food remained untouched. Grace quietly placed a fresh cup of coffee beside him. She did not ask questions. She simply said that sometimes coffee was easier to finish when it was hot. Cole looked at her for several seconds before lowering his eyes. That small moment would have meant nothing to anyone else, but it would become important later. Around 11:30, the bar became crowded again. Music filled the room, customers shouted over one another, and the kitchen struggled to keep up. Grace moved between tables carrying plates when a man near the entrance began arguing with another customer. Rebecca tried to calm them down, but the argument quickly ended when the men realized everyone was watching. Then Cole returned from outside. He had been drinking, but he was still conscious of what was happening around him. He walked toward the bar and saw Grace talking to another customer. The customer was an older man who had apparently complained about his bill. Something went wrong. Nobody could later agree exactly what happened. The old man's voice rose. Grace tried to explain. Cole misunderstood the situation. He believed the man was threatening her. In a flash of anger, Cole stepped forward, grabbed Grace by the shoulder, and pulled her away from the confrontation. Grace stumbled. Cole reached toward her uniform, intending to move her out of the way. The fabric tore. The entire room stopped. Grace immediately covered herself, humiliated and terrified. Cole froze. But then his eyes fell on what had been hidden beneath the torn shirt. Across Grace's upper chest was a long, pale scar running toward her shoulder. Beneath it was a smaller surgical scar, and just below that was a faded hospital identification bracelet tied around her wrist. Cole stared. He knew that bracelet. Not that exact bracelet, but the hospital. The same hospital where his younger brother had spent his final hours. Grace's eyes filled with tears as she tried to cover herself. She was not ashamed of the scars. She was ashamed that everyone was staring. Cole's face changed completely. He asked her what had happened, but Grace did not answer. Rebecca rushed toward her with a jacket. Grace pulled it around herself and ran through the kitchen door. The bar remained silent. Cole stood there staring at the torn piece of fabric in his hand. One of his friends approached him, but Cole pushed him away and walked outside. He found Grace behind the building, sitting on a wooden crate, trying to breathe. She finally told him the truth. 2 years earlier, Noah had been involved in a terrible car accident. A drunk driver had crossed the center line and struck the vehicle Grace and her son were traveling in. Noah survived, but he needed months of treatment. Grace had suffered internal injuries and required emergency surgery. She had spent nearly everything she had on hospital bills. Then came the scars. Then came the debt. Then came the nights when she worked 2 jobs and slept only a few hours because she could not afford to lose either one. The bracelet was from the night Noah nearly died. Grace had kept it because she wanted to remember that he had survived. Cole listened without interrupting. Then Grace told him something else. The drunk driver who caused the accident had been a man named Aaron Bennett, Cole's brother. Cole's face went pale. Aaron had been the one driving the other vehicle. For years, Cole had carried guilt over his brother's death. He had never known the full story. He had believed Aaron died because another driver had caused the crash. He had never known the other family had survived. Grace looked at him and realized who he was. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The man Cole had spent years mourning was the same man who had nearly destroyed Grace's family. And the woman Cole had just frightened was the person his brother had hurt. Cole finally understood why Grace had looked at him so strangely when he first entered the bar. She had recognized the name stitched onto the patch on his jacket. She had known exactly who he was. Yet she had still brought him coffee. She had still smiled. She had still treated him like a human being. That realization broke something inside him. Cole apologized, but Grace told him the apology was not enough. Not because she wanted revenge, but because she wanted him to understand that anger had consequences. Cole spent the next several weeks trying to do exactly that. He paid for Grace's damaged uniform. Then, he helped cover Noah's remaining medical expenses, but Grace initially refused the money. Cole did not force her. Instead, he began volunteering at the community center, where Noah received physical therapy. He discovered that Noah loved motorcycles. One Saturday morning, Cole arrived with a small toy motorcycle and left it at the front desk without saying who it was from. Noah eventually found out. A friendship slowly formed. Cole also began speaking publicly about drunk driving, something he had avoided for years because it forced him to confront his brother's mistakes. Grace watched him change. Not overnight. Not perfectly. But genuinely. Months later, the Rusty Spur held a charity event to raise money for families affected by drunk driving accidents. Hundreds of people attended. Motorcycles filled the parking lot, but this time the riders were not there to drink. They were there to help. Grace stood behind the bar wearing a new uniform. The scar on her shoulder was still there. Nothing could erase it, but she no longer tried to hide it. Cole stood near the entrance beside Noah, who proudly wore a tiny motorcycle helmet. When the event ended, Grace looked around the crowded room and realized something she had never expected. The worst night of her life had eventually led to one of the most meaningful changes in her life. The torn shirt had not revealed weakness. It had revealed survival. It had revealed a mother who had endured pain without becoming cruel. It had revealed a man who had spent years drowning in anger, but finally found the courage to face the truth. And it had revealed that sometimes the people who look broken are actually the strongest people in the room. Before everyone left that night, Cole approached Grace one final time. He did not ask her to forget what happened. He did not ask for forgiveness. He simply thanked her for showing him kindness when he had given her every reason not to. Grace smiled and told him that forgiveness was not about pretending the past never happened. It was about refusing to let the past control the future. Cole nodded. Outside, motorcycles started their engines one by one. Inside, Grace watched Noah laugh with the other children. For the first time in years, she felt something she had almost forgotten how to feel. Peace. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes people can change, and subscribe to Kind Heart Stories. Your support helps these emotional stories reach people who may need a little hope today. And before you leave, comment kindness can change lives if you believe that one act of compassion can create a chain of change far bigger than we ever realize. Because Grace never expected that a torn shirt, a terrible misunderstanding, and a stranger's anger would uncover the truth that changed two families forever. Sometimes life breaks us in places nobody can see. Sometimes our scars become the proof that we survived. And sometimes the person standing in front of us on the worst day of our life is not there to destroy us. Sometimes they are there to remind us that even after everything we have lost, there is still a reason to believe in tomorrow.